Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dust Jacket Radio. I am your host, Jacob Valdez, and I'm here with
John Glaze.
And John, do you want to take the honor introducing our guest author?
Okay, well, we have our guest author today. We have her poster hanging up on the wall, too, here. Eva Pohler. That's how you pronounce
Polar,
it.
like polar bear.
Polar.
Polar.
Okay, Eva Pohler. Cool. And she's the author of several series of books, actually, most famous of which is The Gatekeeper Sons. We have that over there on the bookshelf. And then we've got the Vampire in Athens.
Yes, the Vampires of Athens.
The Vampires of Athens, plural. Anyways, and then you also
It's
have
not just one.
The mystery book collection was the other one.
That's correct.
That we were talking about earlier.
And then the
The
Purgatorium Series, which just released a Polish edition yesterday.
Okay, so that's a
Well,
total.
congratulations. So I
Thank
see you
you.
have a lot of success coming your way. It's just so amazing. All the hard work you're putting in and everything.
Thank you.
Just, if you can, just let our listeners hear and let them know a little bit about yourself and how you got started.
Well, I'm a native San Antonian, and I knew that I wanted to be a writer from a very young age. All through college, I took every creative writing class I could. And then after college, after starting a family, I started to submit to agents and kept getting rejection after rejection, or I'd get close, I'd be asked to submit more material. And I even got really far with one agent and thought she was going to take on my mystery box, but she ended up pulling out after requesting several revisions because she had moved on. She had just gone on to other projects. Mm-hmm. So and this was around 2012 when the self-publishing industry was starting to evolve. And I was very nervous, especially having gone through academia and looked down at this whole notion of self-publishing and vanity publishing, which are actually two different things. And it was a scary thing to do, but I finally decided that I wanted to take my career in my own hands, and I self-published in August of 2012, and I have not looked back. It has been an exciting ride. And I just retired from a full-time teaching job of over 20 years at UTSA just last December, and it's been amazing.
Awesome. I know you probably have a lot of students that are probably still following you.
I do have a few that I keep in touch with that have read everything. It's been fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, we did some research on you. So no, but the Gatekeeper Saga. A teen becomes entangled with the gods of Mount Olympus. One of them falls in love with her. Some gods love her and give her magical gifts, and others try to kill her. So that's one of your biggest sagas right now that still continues going on.
Yeah, that's my breadwinner, actually, and it's been an Amazon bestseller multiple times, so it's been very exciting.
And we spoke when we first met at the San Antonio Book Festival, which was an honor, and I remember you telling me that you just thought it was just going to be a one book, and then people just kept asking for more.
Well, I envisioned it originally as a trilogy, so I did have 3 books mapped out in my head. And it ends after the 3rd book. But my readers just said, come on, you can't do this. You got to keep going. So I thought, well, I'll write a few more. So it was going to be a 6th book. And then, we want more. We want a spinoff. So I have a prequel that came out in April called The Gatekeeper's Bride, which gives the origin story of the whole world. And then I have a spinoff series. The 1st book comes out in August, and that's called Hypnose. So it takes one of the other brother and kind of starts to develop his world a little more.
So, by the way, to our listeners, just to give you a little bit of background, it follows heavily Greek mythology. Mm-hmm. So, Hypnos is the Greek god of slumber and dreaming, and then it also follows Thanos, the Greek god of death.
Thanatos, yeah.
Thanatos, sorry, yeah.
That's good.
So he's the
main character of the story.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
and he's the guy that he's the boat driver in
well,
Greek mythology.
Charon is actually the boat driver. Thanatos goes and gets the souls from the dying bodies and brings them to Charon. And then Charon takes you across on his ferry through the different rivers of the underworld, through judgment, and then on to your final place, your final destination.
Obviously. She knows her Greek mythology.
Yeah, she does.
I'm obsessed.
That follows up to my next question, and I know a lot of our listeners would like to know is why Greek mythology when you have other mythology? You have Norse mythology, you have Roman mythology. So what made you attract to the Greek mythology more than anything?
Well, when I was in the 8th grade, I had this amazing English teacher, Mr. Griffin. And he had Greek mythology stories in his classroom, in his library. So during free reading time, I would read them. I would just eat them up. And I remember whenever we had our Scholastic Book Club book order, I would always order all the Greek mythology books. And I just got obsessed with it at a young age, and always enjoyed those stories, particularly the Hades and Persephone myth. And I remember when Hercules, the animated Disney movie, came out, I was so frustrated with the way they portrayed Hades with the fiery hair and all demon-like, because so many stories, modern stories, tend to conflate Hades and Satan, but they're so different. They're two different characters. And so I wanted to write a series that sort of stood up for Hades and showed that even though he might not be the most merciful and the most compassionate, he is fair and just. And so that's kind of one of the motives behind writing that story.
Awesome. And then basically you said just recently that you loved writing. You try to take every writing course, and ever since you were young, what inspired you the most at that young age to be like, I want to be that. I want to be a writer. I just want to do it.
I think I was in the 6th or 7th grade when an uncle of mine, he was a Vietnam veteran, and he came back and went to college using the GI Bill, and he had this old introduction to literature anthology that he didn't want, and he knew that I liked to read. And he gave it to me, and I read it from cover to cover multiple times and fell in love with all the stories, and especially Anton Chekhov and Robert Frost. And I remember learning that Anton Chekhov was a writer and a doctor. So for a long time, that was my goal. I was going to be a doctor and then a writer on the side. But my passion for literature surpassed my love of science and medicine, and I eventually just decided to focus on writing and literature.
Okay. And I know most of your novels are dedicated to the YA, the young adult audience. What kind of swayed you to that genre more than anything? That
was kind of an accident. I didn't intend to become a writer for young adults. I always imagined that I would write more literary novels like Tracy Chevalier and Anne Patchett. Those are two of my favorites. But when I was out at UTSA, they asked me, the woman who was teaching the young adult lit class retired, and they were looking for someone to take over. And I did already read in the genre. I read a lot of young adult lit, so they asked me if I would consider taking over teaching that class, and I did. And over the years just became more and more intrigued with the genre and felt I was becoming an expert. You know, it's been 20 years since I did that, and it just seemed like a natural thing, since I knew that genre and knew that market, that I should also write for it. So I did.
Oh, okay, awesome. And
so I'm sure that helped you make a lot of decisions when you were setting out to write your book. Which your first one was The Gatekeeper Sons, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so you decided to make kind of walk us through the process there when you're deciding on all the characters and how you're going to build the story up.
Okay, well, I was actually inspired by a movie called Meet Joe Black, and it starred Brad Pitt and Anthony Hopkins. Do y'all remember that movie? So Death wants a chance to see what it's like, and he goes to this wealthy man who's had a very successful life to try to show him what life is like, but by doing that, he'll extend his life a little more. But there were so many unanswered questions, like who was Death and why was he here and where was he going to go after that? I blew my mind, and I wanted to answer all those questions. So since I knew a lot about Greek mythology and Thanatos, I started to imagine, what if Thanatos had come to Earth? What would have been different if it was all kind of based on Greek mythology, and there would have been some solid answers as to who he was and why he was there and what the rules would be. And so that's where it all started, and I just started fleshing it out. And now in most of the original myths, Thanatos is actually the son of Nyx, who is a much more ancient primordial being. But I decided that since I wanted to also tell a story about Hades and the underworld gods, that I would make Hypnose and his brother Thanatos and Hypnose the sons of Hades and Persephone. And it wasn't a far stretch to make that change, because I did find some Orphic hymns that talked about Persephone being the parents of the Furies, and the Furies are definitely siblings of Hypnose and Thanatos. So I had to kind of tweak some things, but I wanted them to be younger gods so that the story was more for a younger audience. So if they would have been really ancient, it would have been even creepier, you know. So
because you're doing it in a Greek mythology. Greek mythology has so much history behind it. How much time did you have to dedicate for researching, for your stories?
Well, research is one of my favorite parts of the writing process. It's such an inspiration to do research. It reminds me of like on HGTV when the characters decide, when the designers decide to go shopping and they find like this vase or this fabric that inspires the whole room. That's what the research is like for me. I do research and I find some character or some interesting plot from a myth, and then a whole story just starts to unfold before my eyes, and I enjoy it. I had already had a pretty strong basis in Greek mythology just from being a fan for so long, but then I would just go, and I have a couple of books that I own in my own library, but going online and reading. And I do a lot, and I reread because there are multiple versions out there, and sometimes I have to remember, like, okay, whose version was I using in this story, and make sure I stay consistent, because there's like a couple of different stories, for example, about how Aphrodite comes to be. Some say, she rose in on the foam, and others she's a child of Zeus. So I got to remember whose myths I'm borrowing from and try to stay consistent throughout my series. So
with that in mind and doing I know you said you love researching and picking out different myths and all that. Do you ever reach the point that you're like, I have writer's block, I don't know where to go from here? And if you do, what did you do to overcome that? Did you have like inspiration, like your husband there cheering you on, or did family members or anything else like that?
Well, in terms of thinking up ideas for stories, I have not had block yet because I have all these projects that I still want to write, and I have readers saying, but we want this spin-off and we want this, and so I keep putting these other projects aside to write the ones that I know are going to sell, that I've got readers waiting on. But sometimes even though I might have a vague outline of a book, as I'm writing, I might come to a chapter where I'm just really not sure. I don't see the scene yet. I really don't know how these characters going to interact, and I'm kind of stumped. And when that happens, I do a series of things to help me through it. And y'all are probably going to think this is crazy, but one thing that I do is just lay down like I'm going to go to sleep, and I just start daydreaming. And when I'm in that twilight between being awake and being asleep, sometimes the idea just comes and I jump up and I go write it down. Or I might go for a walk, and while I'm walking, I could probably run into something because I'm just staring up and thinking, and sometimes even talking out loud. I probably look like a total crazy woman. But sometimes I'm walking and talking, and then it just comes. And then another really great place is the shower, okay? And I talk out loud.
I was gonna say that's mine.
I'm in. Luckily, it's a pretty big shower, so because I'm usually gesticulating and I'm acting like this character or that character, and I'm working it all out. And then I get out and I gotta go hurry up and write it down. And then of course, binge eating helps me too. If I'm stuck, I can grab like a box of cookies, and by the time I work my way through it, I've got it's terrible. I know.
I used to have like 5-10 page papers due in college the next day, and I'd take like 6 showers that night just so I could get the whole
Seriously, there's something about the shower and twilight, and
you outline on the steam and the glass. And you're naked. You just don't care, right? You're just thinking about it. Totally makes sense to me.
Yeah. So
awesome.
Those are some of my methods.
But what are the binge foods you typically go for, by the way? Sweets.
Sugar
Okay.
gives me that instant, and I always have to have a Diet Coke, bubbly, on ice, fresh. If it gets flat, I just throw it out and open a new can. I go through them fast because I only like them during that first, 15, 20 minutes.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool. I like that. Very specific. I like to ask people, what do you like to write with? Are you a pen and paper kind of person?
I used to be when I was younger in college. I used to think there's no way I'll ever be able to compose a story on a keyboard. I'm a pen and paper girl, but it didn't take me very long to adapt to the keyboard, and now I can't imagine. I still do all my initial outlining on like a yellow legal pad, and I keep pages and pages of notes, and a lot of times in the middle of the night I'll just get up and go write, even in the dark, somewhere on that paper to remember, Hypnose has to do this, or Medusa's coming for that, so I don't forget it. And but now I've gotten to the point where I am typing my stories out, and then when I finish a scene, if I don't have time to go on, but I know where I'm going from here, I'll just type a little note to myself right there on the document. In this next chapter, this is what needs to happen, So a lot of it really is keyboard now.
Yeah, it's a lot faster with the keyboard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
You can get your words per minute way up. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the questions I have too is, and I think it's about to leave my mind here, so I'm gonna try to spit it out real quick. Is the when you're writing, like in your outlines and stuff, do you listen to music?
That's an interesting question. Sometimes,
Is
but
it
usually
Greek
not.
music?
Usually not, because I like to sit in the main room of my house, which is a living room, which is also the walkway to all the other rooms in the house. And I do that because I used to feel isolated in the early years when my kids were young. I would go in the home office and write, and I felt like I'm absent from their lives for so much of the time because I'm off on my own. So I moved myself, once I had a laptop years ago, into the main living room. So people are walking by, dogs are walking by. My daughter used to play her baritone, my son his saxophone, my other son his ocarina. And so there's music going on, but it's usually 3 different songs and different instruments. But I can, block it all out and focus. It can be noisy as hell. Mm-hmm. My husband can have on something on the TV, and I can just block it all out and write. But I like being surrounded by my family. I don't want to miss out on being around them, so that's what I do.
Oh, awesome. And another question I have, and it's kind of hard to answer probably because you have so many book series out there, is through all your series, which character reflects yourself the most?
That's actually easy to answer. Uh-huh. My most recent mystery novel, called The Mystery House, it's actually pretty closely based on me and my 2 best friends. But I project us about 10 years into the future, when our kids have all grown and gone out of the house, but before we've had grandchildren. And I see the 3 of us going through this midlife crisis together, where we decide to flip a house. And I've actually had that conversation with my friends. What adventure can we go on? Let's flip a house, because we are all into HGTV and that kind of thing. So yeah, in the novel, we decide to pick a house, and I base it on the King William district here in San Antonio.
My
and there's
wife loves that area.
There's this whole ghost story that they uncover. And but yeah, it really is. In fact, I named the character Ellen because that way I can rethink Eva, Ellen, and then my best friends' names, I name them something that helps me remember who's who, and I develop their appearances and everything very much based on them and our relationship. The 3 of us in that story, very much like our relationship. So that's the one. It would be The Mystery House.
Okay, and then the follow-up question. I'm trying to veer you off to the Gatekeepers. But if you would have got to meet one of those main characters in your story, which one would it be, and what would you ask your character?
Oh, wow. That's tough. Oh, my gosh. That's kind of like Sophie's Choice, Yeah. I guess I'd want to meet Hades. Mm-hmm. Even though in the Gatekeeper Saga, he's not the main character, Therese and Thanatos are. I have a strong affinity for Hades, and I guess I would just want to ask him some questions about the underworld. And I mean, obviously he doesn't really exist, but if we could pretend that he did, then I think he's the one I would want to talk to.
Wow. I'm surprised it wasn't Therese. I was waiting for that one.
Well, you asked me who. Therese is actually my daughter. Kind of a combination of me and my daughter. The animal lover of my daughter. So Therese, I feel like I already kind of know her because she's already a member of my family. So,
how did you draw inspiration for the other side characters, by the way, in the Gravekeeper's Sons saga?
Well, sometimes I would base them on loosely on a person I knew, but then they would end up taking on a life of their own as the story, started, and so, or as the story developed, the characters would become really unique. They would no longer. Unlike the Mystery House, which did stay pretty close to me and my 2 best friends, I'd just start off with an inkling, or I'd borrow a part of this person I knew and a part of that person I knew and kind of compile them into this new person. And then over time, they would reveal their personalities to me. And I'd start to see quirks that this character had. And another thing that helps is to try to look at how these 2 characters that are developing are different, and how they might foil one another. And for example, Therese and Jen, even though they have a lot in common, they're both in the band, they're both on the swim team, they live just, half a mile away in the same area of Colorado in the San Juan Mountains. They both love horses and animals and so many things in common. Their personalities are very, very different. And so to see how they're different, how Jen just says exactly what she thinks and blurt things out and is just raw and natural with you, whereas Therese is a little more refined. She thinks before she speaks. She worries about hurting other people's feelings, and she's much more caring about all life. That just happened on its own over time.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, cool. That answers that question. And now I know you teach at, or you were teaching anyways. You just retired, which
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, which is apparently to the great sadness of your students. But
Thank you.
So what do you like? What do you normally like to teach in your classes?
I love English and literature, and I also liked teaching writing, and I miss it to some extent. I actually miss being in the classroom in front of the students. I don't necessarily miss grading all the papers, but I miss
My wife's a teacher, and she doesn't like that either.
but I miss the, regular interaction with people, getting excited about discussing ideas, whether it's, ideas that we're finding in stories, or whether we're talking about controversial ideas that are happening in society. But I thoroughly enjoyed, my teaching career, and everything's been going just perfectly for me, in terms of teaching just long enough to where I was starting to get a little burnout, but now I can switch and write full time for a while. So
Okay. What books do you typically recommend to people that are just starting out writing? Like if they were...
One of my favorites is an older one by John Gardner called The Art of Fiction.
Okay.
And then another I would recommend that's not nearly as old, it's a little more recent, by Brown and King. It's called Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. That one has been kind of like a little bit of a Bible for self-editing. And then I also liked Donald Mass's The Breakout Novelist.
Okay.
That one was really good for plot. They all have like different things that they help with, so that one was really good for helping get an idea of keeping the plot momentum going.
Mm-hmm. What about what fiction do you recommend people check out before they... I guess it depends on what
genre they want to write. And I definitely recommend that you read books that are bestsellers in your genre. Mm-hmm. And that you know what genre you're writing in. And also, it's easier to build a brand, an author brand, and to build an audience if you stick with one genre. That was a mistake that I made early on in my career. I had written The Gatekeeper Sons, and I'd also written The Mystery Box, which is for adults. It's a suspense thriller, psychological thriller. Mm-hmm. And since I was new, I just decided I would publish them both and let the market decide. And it was really hard once I started learning how to market, which I've gotten better at and pretty good at, actually.
Mm-hmm. What was your initial steps in marketing?
Initially I just published them and put them out there and, only sold a book here or there. It wasn't until I went to a conference about a year later that was geared toward self-publishing and marketing that all of a sudden my whole writing life changed. And so one thing that I learned that I recommend you do if you're a self-publisher is to write a series and make the first book free. Just by doing that, I immediately started selling books every day, because people would read the free book, and then a percent of those people would go on to read the next books in the series.
It's your profit loss leader, is that what you call it?
That's right.
Yeah,
it's just your loss leader that you put out there. It's and then you rein them. You rein a lot of them in that way. And when you have a free first book, there's all of these bargain sites that will let you post information about your free book, either for free or for $5, something like that. So you just market that first book. And also in that first book, you tell readers to subscribe to your newsletter so that you can have their email addresses and you can let them know about your next releases. Mm-hmm. And so making that first book free, that was the biggest, best marketing tool of all. Mm-hmm. And trying to find like BookBub and other ebook bargain sites to promote it for you. That was probably the best. And then the newsletter is the next best thing. And then you can also do things like Facebook advertising, Google AdWords, and
Google AdWords keyword, right? Yeah. Google keyword or something.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So one question that I just personally want to ask you, and maybe this is a little bit off topic, but I know you write specifically for, in the Gatekeeper Sons anyways, it's like teenage girls and, definitely a specific demographic. If not just girls, boys could read it too at that age. I think it'd be still pretty interesting. But it's definitely about the high school experience and growing up. And anyway, so I could tell that you drew heavily from Insurgents and Stephanie Meyer's books, the Twilight series a little bit. Not drew directly from, but sort of in style.
Well, I hadn't read Veronica Roth yet, but I had read Stephanie Meyer's.
Okay, Stephanie Meyer's. And then what were some of your other inspiration? Or, I mean, I guess, did you base your books off those guys at all, or?
I liked the love triangle that was in Stephanie Meyer's Twilight series, so I just enjoyed that so much, and also The Host. I really enjoyed I enjoyed The Host even more. I probably read that book like 3 or 4 times, and so I wanted, and I've always loved love triangles, and I've noticed that in so many of the really classic stories that have stayed with us forever, there's usually a love triangle. And so in that respect, yeah, Stephanie Meyer's influenced me in that respect. But there's other books too that have those love triangles that also inspired me as well.
So, and then I guess that's a leading question, by the way. On to my next question is like, you mentioned that you liked literature earlier, like, pure literature for adults, stuff like that, or, English majors, I guess, or, but how the youth, the girl novel or the Twilight novels, the Divergent series of the world, what do you think their place is in the literature world? What do they contribute to it? And, like in your books as well.
I think that all books have different purposes, and readers read for different reasons. And so I don't think there's anything superior about books that we classify as literary that are meant to inspire more deep thinking, philosophical ideas. I don't think that they are superior to a story like, I don't know, Harry Potter, or something that's really written more for young people as an adventure story and of your imagination. I think they just serve different purposes. So I think that a literary novel is just one classification of a type of story. And so is young adult fantasy or science fiction. I don't think that we should say, I personally don't believe that one is better work of art than the other. I just believe that it's art serving different purposes.
Well explained. Yeah. And me and John had this discussion before you even got here, because I was like, I think every book serves one main goal, and that's getting people to read. And I think that's the most important thing ever. I think the biggest question I want to ask you now is, how hard was the transition from teaching to full-time writing?
Well, it's always been a dream of mine, so it was something that I pursued very strongly, with great determination. And I want to point out that self-publishing isn't for the faint of heart. You have to be a go-getter. You have to be willing to learn how to do things yourself. If you're not willing to learn how to market your books, how to help people find them, how to find the editors that are going to edit for you, the cover artists who are going to design, because you have to look for information and educate yourself. And if you're more of the kind of writer who needs someone to hold your hand, then you should stick with traditional publishing, because it really is hard work. And so I was very determined to be a full-time writer. It was a dream of mine for a long time.
And during this process, did you feel vulnerable? Because you're just kind of like a nerve that's not covered, and you're just like,
yes. Every time I publish a book, I'm nervous. Are people going to like it? And even now, even though I have had thankfully, so many amazing reviews, anytime I get a negative one, it still hurts. It's hard not to be insensitive. Now, my confidence level doesn't wane because it's been long enough. But initially, when I only had a couple of books out, I would think, maybe I do suck. Maybe I'm not a good writer. What am I doing? But, I've had enough people say, I've read this book over and over and I love it. And I realize that the ones who don't enjoy it, the ones who leave the negative reviews, they weren't the right audience. And so instead of taking it personally, I go look at the negative reviews of J.K. Rowling and Tolkien and, some of the novelists that I love, and I see their negative reviews. And I'm reminded we all get negative reviews. We're all disliked by some people, and those people are not our target audience. So I just kept going. And finally, when I learned a couple of marketing techniques that helped me, Facebook advertising and newsletter email marketing. I took a couple of courses back last summer. And it got a lot of my marketing on autopilot. My sales became very consistent. And once that happened, I started to double and triple the income of my teaching. And once that happened, I thought, I know what to do now. I can finally let the semester go. And I actually first just went down to teaching part-time and then just teaching one course. And then finally I let it go altogether because I just wanted to make sure. But so it was a gradual transition.
And now that you're a full-time writer, do you find a lot of time going to events? I know I met you at the San Antonio Book Festival. Do you schedule a lot of events? Are you going to like events to like I went to just recently the Texas Library Association conference. I'm surprised I didn't see you there.
I was there last year, and I probably go there next year. I probably do it every other year. You know,
so you'll be the one here in San Antonio.
Is it going to be in San Antonio? Oh, then I will definitely be there. Yeah. It's an expensive one to attend as an exhibitor, so that's why I thought I'd stagger it every other year. But I had a really good. I sold out last year when I went, and now a lot of my books are getting into schools and libraries because of the connections that I made through that. But I have learned early on in my career, I made the mistake of thinking that I needed a national book tour in order to get my books out. And I traveled all over the world and spent lots of money on flight and hotel room. And, it's expensive. And I finally learned that, especially as a self-published writer, that my biggest money comes from my ebook sales. And so by focusing on getting recognition or getting notice of the ebook, the electronic, that I could spend less money and make more. So I don't travel so much out of state. I try to stay local now. San Antonio Book Fair, Comic Palooza in Houston. I'm planning on going to the Texas Teen Book Festival, which will be October 1st in Austin at St. Edward's University.
Which, when I was doing my research, you weren't planning on going to Houston at first, weren't you?
I wasn't. I was on the fence because even though I went last year and sold out and had a great time.
And I heard a fan got to you. A fan got a hold of you and wanted you to go there.
Yes, that's right. And last year I had an amazing experience where a woman from the Philippines came up to me and said, my daughter lives in the Philippines. Your books aren't available there. I want to buy them all and I'm going to ship them to her. And I knew who she was talking about because that reader she's already read it all in ebook, and she'd been messaging me on Facebook. And I just was so honored that, this woman made a point to come and find me and get these books for her daughter. I mean, I actually kind of cried a little bit.
No, I understand. Because you're being an author, and especially, a beginning one, you're just like, I'm making an impact on someone's life already, and that's just amazing. And then, yes, that it comes with your writing, but you really don't know when you're going through the footprints of your book, the blueprints, and like, I'm just creating a story if someone likes it.
You really don't.
Yeah.
And so when they do reach out and tell you things, like I had another writer who was in the hospital for several weeks, and she said that she read my books over and over and that they distracted her from her condition. And just that also brought me to tears. Maybe I cry kind of easily, but, just knowing that other people enjoyed it, that you brought pleasure and, maybe even solace to people who were suffering some way. That's just such an amazing rush,
Well, hopefully I'll see you more in all these conferences and exhibits. And maybe when you, this new book, which we're going to jump in and talk about, I know you're going to start pushing it. And please let our listeners know what the new book is going to be.
Okay. It's called Hypnose, a Gatekeeper spinoff, book 1. And I never intended to write this book, but so many of my readers have fallen in love with Hypnose. Hypnose is the twin brother of Thanatos. Thanatos is the god of death. Hypnose is the god of sleep. And Hypnose does begin to play a bigger role in the series by the time you get to the 4th book, just because...
Yeah, I was going to say the 3rd and 4th book.
Yeah, readers really wanted to see more of him, so I did bring his point of view in. But now I'm writing a book that focuses mostly on him. And it's the first of a series of books that kind of fall right after the end of the Gatekeeper Saga. They follow the lives of other characters that emerge at the end of the story. And Hypnose is going to start that series off for us. And so what happens is the gods had a major war towards I don't want to give any plot spoilers away, but there were negotiations made, and one of the conditions of the negotiation was that no more gods would be born, no more gods could be made. And so here, Jin and Hip, they really would like to have a child. Well, Jin doesn't want to have a child, but Hip does. And so the story is about him seeing if there's some way that they could finally have a child. And he goes to Zeus, and there's a attack on Gaia, who is Earth, Mother Earth. And it's releasing these monsters that have been held captive in Tartarus, in the deepest pits. And it's releasing them, and they are killing mortals. And it's just, the gods are desperate.
Oh wow, I feel like we just got a teaser trailer.
So
super excited.
So Hypnose makes it his mission to find out who is causing these attacks, to spearhead that quest in exchange for the opportunity to have a child. And so that's the basis for that novel.
Awesome.
Wow.
Now
cool.
I know you're getting more fans and more people want to read your books. Have you ever come to the process of turning your books into a script one day?
I actually have been approached a couple of times. I had a screenwriter from LA email me probably about 7 or 8 months ago, and he and his partner wanted to do a screenplay for the Gatekeeper Sons, but they were right out of school, from their film school. And I don't know if it was the right decision, but I was worried, since they didn't really have any credits, that might not be the best decision. So I kind of said, let's keep talking about it. And he went ahead and did another project, but told me to contact him if I changed my mind. And I'm still sort of kind of waiting to see if something better comes along, which might be dumb, but I feel like I've got time. And then I did have another screenwriter who's from Australia, but he helped prepare the movie. What was it called? Oh gosh, I can't think what it's called, but it did fairly well. He's got a couple of credits to his name. Anyway, he's writing the adaptation for the Purgatorium for me. Now, we haven't optioned it or anything like that, so it's still real early in the process, and I don't know that it ever will even be, the option ever will be sold and
because it still has to go through the studios.
Yes,
and everything.
still has to do that. But just knowing that it's being adapted is kind of exciting, especially that it's being adapted by somebody who has co-directed and produced a couple of films that have, well-known actors in it. That made me a little more, excited about it. But it's a slow process. So.
Oh yes,
Oh, yeah.
And it's nerve-wracking too.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you came here. And it's a small world. We went all to the same high school.
I just discovered that today. We're all East Central High School graduates. Go Hornets.
That's our mascot. Don't mess with us.
One question before I forget, since we were talking about it earlier, ebooks versus paperbacks or hardcover. What do you prefer to read from?
Yeah, you beat me to it. I was gonna ask her
I
that.
never thought I would be an ebook reader, because I love holding the book, feeling the pages, being able to tell how much is left by the thickness of, the remaining pages. I mean, I thought I was going to be old school, but when my husband got me a Kindle for Christmas one year, and I saw how convenient, I even bought my purse because it can hold a Kindle in it, and I take it everywhere. And anytime I have to wait, like in line or, at the doctor's office or whatever, I can pull it out and time goes by like that. And I just love it. It's so convenient, and you can have so many books on it, so because all my shelves are kind of like yours. There's really no blank space on them. So I really love it. And I have found too that the young adult audience, the true young adults, still tend to read mostly paperbacks. In fact, I conducted a survey of college students last year, and 70% of them still preferred paperbacks. But Mark Coker, who's the CEO of Smashwords, did a panel presentation at a conference that I went to last summer, and he said that studies are showing that that's changing, that right now the adults are the ones that are buying the electronic devices, but as they start handing their old devices down to their children and buying new ones for themselves, more and more young people are going to start reading the ebooks, and we'll see that the young adult books are going to start selling to actual young adults more and more.
I know. I'm one of those people. I'm so hard to transition over. He gets after me.
Well,
I like killing trees. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And again, all the stuff she mentioned, how much you have left, how the great feeling of, like, oh, wow, I'm turning these pages really quickly, or, but You get to pull it out whenever you want. It's this big. There's tons of free books on there. I mean, I got your book, your first book, for free.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to get introduced into literature, of all types.
Yeah.
Yeah, sample things without having to take a risk. I have 2 books that are free, the Gatekeeper Sons and the Purgatorium, and people can sample it. If they find out, what, this isn't for me, they haven't spent anything, they haven't lost an investment except a few minutes of their time, so. And there are a lot of others like that out there.
And it's all linked up with Goodreads too, so you have a whole social network that's set up
That's
where you
right.
can talk with your friends about what you're reading.
So you have a Goodreads account, correct?
I do. I used to be a lot more active, and I still go on there at least once a week just to see.
I was going to ask you if you have a reading challenge this year.
I didn't make myself a reading challenge, but I did recently start Lady Midnight, Cassandra Clare's most recent release, which I am loving. It's so good. And I'm probably about halfway through, and I haven't been updating my status. Like, I used to be real religious, even if I read a few pages, I'd go update that Goodreads status, and I haven't been doing it as much lately, but...
John's been kicking my butt this year on my reading challenge here.
So you both have challenges?
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to do a book a week.
Oh, my goodness, that's
Same
great.
here.
Y'all are good. That's great. That's awesome.
But I recently, because I don't know what I want to read, but I think I'm going to do the Modern Library's top 100 books. I'm going to try and power through all those. I've already read like a third of them, or like maybe almost half, but I'm going to get the ones I haven't read. I haven't read Ulysses yet, and that's like the next book.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a very complicated one.
Yeah, we have another author coming up. You met her at the book festival, Rose Garcia.
Oh, she's my real good friend. Yes.
Yeah, I contacted her, and she said she would love to participate. So.
Oh, wonderful! I'm so excited.
And she's the one your friend that you talked about in your book.
No, she is she didn't grow. The ladies in my book are my neighbors, and they've been living we've been neighbors for years and have become best friends. Rose I met through writing, but she and I go to events together. So we do San Antonio Book Fair. We're going to be together at Comic Palooza and also at Texas Teen Book Festival. We just,
That's in Austin, right? The one in Austin?
The one in Austin at St. Edward's University, October 1st. And it just makes the event so much more fun when you have a friend sitting next to you.
I'll see you there.
Oh, good. Yay.
Awesome.
My niece was just accepted there, so she'll be there
too.
too.
St. Edward's?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a prestigious school.
And she's an East Central. She's graduating from East Central this year, Devonna Miller.
Whole family is Hornets.
Most of them, yeah. Most of them, that's right.
One other question I would ask you is social media. Are you on Twitter or Instagram at all?
Yes, I am. I'm on both those places: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Goodreads, YouTube. I even have my own YouTube videos.
And of all our listeners, if this is their first time listening to you and our viewers, can you let them know where they can find your books at?
Well, if you go to evapohler.com, that's EVAPOHLER.com, and then you just click on books, you can find links to all the different retailers. They're available at every place that sells ebooks.
And the first one's free, so I encourage you to try it.
The first one's free. And they're also available in paperback, and you can get them at most bookstores online. And if they don't have them at a brick and mortar bookstore, they can order them for you. And then some of my books are also available in audiobook. The whole Gatekeeper Saga is, as is the Purgatorium series and a couple of the mystery novels.
Is that on Audible right now? Or?
On Audible and Amazon and iTunes as well.
That's awesome. How do you get paid for, like, if someone uses their credits to use that? Or?
Yes, I do.
Oh,
They have it all classified on your dashboard. There's a different weight to when a book is bought with credits versus with cash or money.
Did you read your own book on Audible?
Well, I had to, just to make sure the narrator didn't mess anything up, because I didn't narrate them. I had a narrator read them for me, and so I listened and approved them all. And
Awesome.
And sometimes I'll listen to them because I get forgetful when I'm writing the sequel of something. I'll think, wait a minute, I have to go back and either reread or re-listen to my own books just so I make sure they're consistent. It's terrible. Yeah.
Well, Eva Pohler, we're so glad that you came here and joined us today. And I don't have any more questions. Do you, John?
No, that should be it. We're going to try and throw up the link to the Twitter and stuff like that if they want to follow you. Keep reading, guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great way to continue reading. It's if you got some younger people that that are looking for good books.
And Eva Pohler, do you have any last encouraging words for the young writers out there?
Absolutely. If it's your dream, you can make it happen. You just have to, especially in today, this is the best time in history to be a writer. Not only because you have better tools for writing, like just keyboards and being able to delete and things like that, but also more resources, more ways to help your readers find you. I mean, there's no better time in history to be a writer, and if you want to make it happen, you can. There should be no reason why you can't do it.
There you go, guys. And until next time,
Keep reading.
keep reading, guys.
Thank you all so much. That was such fun.